Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with comics writer, comics creator, author Doug Wagner. Doug, thank you for jumping in and joining.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm so glad to have you. I know that lots of folks out there listening will know you for creating in worlds like Arrow and Batman and several of those, but really interested also to talk about some of the independent creator-owned material you've worked on, Click, Click, Boom, Plush, Plastic being a few of those. And you have quite a number of those books as well, in
Oh
addition to
yeah.
those three.
Yeah, I've done, I worked for DC Custom for probably about 10 years. And then
Hmm.
obviously, I've been doing stuff with Image probably for about almost 20. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. It's quite a comic stack that you have.
No, thanks.
Yeah. What connected you with comics and storytelling?
Oh, there's two levels to that. First, is, like what got me into it originally was
Hmm.
just me
Hmm.
being a kid, and I'm a little bit older, so it was a spinner rack, at
Right.
the good old 7-Eleven that got me started. It was just me being a little bit of a weird kid. My parents started me a little too early in school, so I was always the youngest in class and that kind of stuff. So just always a little bit of an outsider in that environment. And so, I was always looking for worlds to play in.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Bumped into, I think, and this would be a wild guess, but it was probably something like Hot Stuff or Casper or the Flintstones that eventually got me into comics, just fell in love with like the whole storytelling aspect of comics and the color and the still images. And even back then, I really enjoyed the art and the fact that you could take a second to look at it versus the
Hmm.
cartoon,
Hmm.
where you really didn't get a chance to like, back then you couldn't pause, so like you didn't get a chance to like really dive into stuff. And
Yeah.
just fell in love with comics, probably like 5 or 6. And then as I got older, just kept developing my taste, got into superheroes, became an Uncanny X-Men kid for the longest time.
Hmm.
That was always my go-to. And then like when I turned 17, I was working with Cully Hamner, who's been as you know him as an artist in comics for decades.
Hmm.
I went to
Hmm.
the same high school. So we kind of found each other there and we kind of just started creating comics just for fun, just for our own thing. And then it kind of dawned on me one day that like, I think I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's just, the enjoyment of comics just kind of was always a part of my life. And then, at 17, I was like, I think I want to do this. Now the journey from there to, to getting published was a long one. But that's, that was the beginning of it.
Yeah. The writer journey seems to be its own path, and it usually is pretty long.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, Cully has been on the show as well, and great creator, and great that you have that connection, collaboration. Also a very, very friendly guy as
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Like I said, I've known him since, well, I was a senior when we met and he was a freshman.
Mhm.
And so, there's a little bit of difference there, but like, yeah, we were friends from that day. The day we figured out we both loved comics, it was just like, from there on.
Love that. Yeah. You were talking about sort of the playground of different worlds and playing in different worlds. I always like to ask about process and how writing comes to be. So anything that you'd like to share about your process?
Oh man, I mean, the process, especially when you talk about, ideation, the
Mm-hmm.
creation of an idea and where that comes from is people always ask, hey, where do you get your ideas? And I'm like, hey, I always call them the muses because that's my favorite, the Greek muses. And you just never know when they're going to speak to you and how and how much they're going to give you. And I've had ideas on road trips. I've had ideas, talking to people on the phone, dreams, you
Mm-hmm.
name it. They just kind of pop in. And sometimes it's just a title. Sometimes you get the whole story all at once. Sometimes they whisper a scene to you. So you don't ever really understand where it's going to come from. So depending on how much they decide to give you at one point, because they're always stingy with that stuff, you
Yeah.
got to have to
Yeah.
like you kind of I always start with like just kind of like a paragraph, and kind of go, okay, where's this idea going? And I build it from there, depending on where the paragraph might be in the middle of the story, the paragraph might be the ending, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of build from there. And it's just, sometimes it's a tedious and long process, and sometimes it moves quickly. You just never know how it's going to happen. And then one of the key things I always try to do, like when I get like a solid bit of the story, is then I start thinking about the log line. I know that sounds crazy,
No,
But what
no.
I've, first off, I don't think you'll find a writer who loves log lines. We all hate them. Like, tell us your story in a single sentence. You're like, oh,
Right.
but you won't get all the minutia. You won't get all the cool stuff. And so, but what I do find is like one of the benefits is that is sometimes you'll write out your log line and you'll go, oh, that sounds boring. And you realize like I have to work on my log line to make it interesting. And in
Hmm.
turn, it can sometimes lead you down a road of like, oh, this is actually a better idea now that I realized that the story I was working on was boring. Let me add in some cannibalistic furries, and then everybody's like, hey, what are you doing?
Right, right.
So you work from there, and then I'm a little bit slower than a lot of other authors, especially guys in comics. Some people can do like 4 or 5 books a month. I'm like
Hmm.
two at the most. And it's because I think my process is just long, but I like it that way. Like I said, I start with a summary, like a paragraph. I build that to where it's like a full summary, scene by scene. And then I break it down, comic, issue by issue, page by page, panel by panel. So it takes me a little bit longer, but I like that process now for me because I feel like it helps me not miss as much, especially when you're talking about, like foreshadowing and
Hmm.
having things come full circle, those kind of things. It helps me. Now it definitely slows down the process, but that's just the way I like to work. I like to like steps, till I
Yeah.
till I get to a full script.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love to hear about the process, and it's always interesting to hear how things come together because I know that sometimes people just kind of fly in and go
Hmm.
with whatever happens, and then there are other people that are like, "This is the way it shall be," and there might be little changes along the way.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely like I fly, fly by the seat of my pants at first, but then
Uh-huh,
I have to bring
uh-huh,
it back and go, okay, we need some story structure and what's missing, what did I miss?
uh-huh.
Again, is this full circle? Because I mean when you're just raging and having fun, you have a tendency to like go, oh, I didn't really have any themes going on.
Mhm.
I was just blowing stuff up. You know,
Right, right,
so this was fun. Okay, now let me go back and fix it.
right, right. Let's add some theme and some meaning in between the
Yes,
action.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, love it, love it. Um, well, curious about you. You were talking, of course, about cannibalistic furries. So I know the book you have in mind there. The kinds of stories that you're especially drawn to tell, and thinking especially in creator-owned spaces, but across the board, of course, you're welcome to speak to anything that you've worked on. Uh, Anything that particularly fires you up as far as a type of story or an aspect of a story.
Man, for me, like first off, I'm a character guy. So that's where I
Hmm.
always start is like I like a really interesting, especially if they're quirky. I love quirky characters. So, if I can work on quirky characters and, like you were talking about, a plush, it was cannibalistic furries was kind of the main thrust there.
Hmm.
That all got
Hmm.
started with Plastic, which was Edwin, who was a serial killer in love with a blow-up doll.
Hmm.
And I kind of like those quirky, like odd characters and playing with them. And honestly, that's the kind of stuff I'm drawn to, even in comics and TV and film. So like, I mean, I'd throw Stranger Things in that, like, hey, this wasn't your standard typical TV show. When
Hmm.
you see
Hmm.
the TV show, and I love, especially the first half of that season is just amazing because it's so weird and adorable all at the same time. And
Yeah.
so I'm attracted to that kind of stuff, even in comics. That's why I like creator owned a lot more now than I used to because there's just so much, like, don't get me wrong, I love my superheroes, but I've kind of over the years, you kind of learn what to expect.
Hmm. Hmm.
Very rare that they're going to like deliver something that's way off center.
Yeah.
You can create your own comics. Like, man, you pick up a book and you just don't know what you're walking into. And I love that feeling. I love the ability to go, hey, I don't know where this is going, and I don't mind. In Spider-Man, you kind of always know, there's themes. Spider-Man as a character for, what, 60, 70 years has had the same theme. Nothing
Hmm.
wrong with that, but I know what to expect. And that's comfortable. And that's great when I'm reading that. But then I
Yeah.
want to put something, like Beneath the Trees or, something, I Kill Giants, stuff like that, where you're like, I don't know what's going on here. And I love it.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
what draws me in. And that's what kind of like motivates me to keep pushing myself to try to come up with even quirkier and weirder tales because that's what I'm drawn to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you clearly have the ability to play in both of those corners because you do have the mainstream characters, the ones that are very like within a certain fence line they can only travel, but then you have these as you say quirky characters and really trailblazing storylines as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's fun. I mean, when you start talking about like people are like, oh, what do you like to write? And I'm one of those guys that likes to write a lot of everything. So sci-fi, action, just over the top action kind of stuff, like what I did with the ride and the hard
Mm-hmm.
place and click click boom are all kind of like action stuff. At the same time, go write my weird dark comedy horror stuff. So yeah, I'm all over the place, and I love the fact that I get to play in all those different worlds. Because that just feeds different parts of my personality.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and makes for an interesting story for sure.
Yeah, let's hope so, right?
Yeah,
That's the goal anyway.
yeah, yeah. Well, I have one more official question, and we can hit anything that we might have missed. And so that question is one that I typically ask, which is what's new or next, and where can people go to learn more?
Okay, well, obviously, for me in June, Plastic Death and Dolls,
Hmm.
which is the
Hmm.
sequel prequel to the first Plastic, is coming out. And it's going to be a 5 issue miniseries through Image. And obviously, you can go to the Image Comics website. That's where I do most of my creator-owned work, if not all of my creator-owned work. And then, honestly, like I'm just focused on like trying to do two, maybe three books a year, miniseries, and that's
Hmm.
that's focus. And so Daniel and I are already deep into the next one. But obviously I can't announce too much before that. Doug Dabbs, the artist that worked with me on Click Click Boom, we've started our next book as well. So it's just right now it's just going to be Plastic Death and Dolls, and to find all my career own stuff, you just go to Image Comics.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, have we missed anything that you want to make sure to share in the talk before we close out?
No, honestly, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously the first thing is Plastic Death and Dolls #1 coming out in June. So
It is around the corner, and
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
I'll make sure this gets out pretty soon so that folks can hear about it on here and check it out on social media and around the web.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. Um, well, Doug, thank you for the time. Thank you for the conversation, and glad to have you back anytime to talk about projects, process, and all of the things.
It's been my honor. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.